All right, now all of my paint is dry. I kind of put a little more white over this spot that turned out pretty gray when I squished my brush too hard. Now I'm gonna go ahead and shake up my blue. And up to this point, I haven't really talked about paint. I am an Americana girl. I love these paints, but there are so many paints that you could choose from. And really, any of the paints would work for what we're doing. I know people who use what's called a heavy body acrylic, and it's super thick, much thicker than this craft paint. And when you put it on, it just has a totally different texture. So as you continue to paint, which I hope you will, you know, every once in a while, try something different, or look up on YouTube somebody who paints with heavy body acrylic, or somebody who does knife painting, or somebody who does watercolor. You really, anytime you watch somebody paint, not me, I'm a doodler, but a real artist, you will learn little tips and tricks that you can then incorporate into the things that you make. So anyways, I'm gonna shake up this Calypso blue. The other thing, I don't know, my dad always told me not to buy the very cheapest thing, and not that it wasn't necessary to buy the most expensive thing. So if you go to a craft store, Michael's or Hobby Lobby, or you order something from Amazon, these paints are kind of very middle of the road. There's definitely paints that are cheaper, and there's definitely acrylics that are more expensive. But I just really love these colors. So this is what I like to use. So anyways, I have a little bit of blue here on my palette. Now what I'm gonna create down here is this tabletop. Remember I told you that in my mind, it's this awesome old chipped up, well-built heavy wood table that somebody stuck out in their trash, and I stopped and picked it up. So I'm using my same dirty foam brush, still has black, still has white. I'm going to just I don't know if you can see that, but there is like hardly any blue on here. That's where I'm gonna start. And I want your tabletop to be about a foam brush top and a half. So, I mean, this is just the like low-tech way that I paint. So I'm gonna put my foam, just the foam part. I'm gonna kind of put it here at the bottom of my canvas to measure. I'm gonna go up about a half. And that's where I'm gonna put my table line, see? Wasn't that so mathematical and complicated? No. So then, with that little bit of blue in my brush, I'm gonna grab a little bit more. I'm just gonna get a little bit of that tabletop put in here. You see how light it is because I'm gonna set my flower box down in there. So I don't wanna go all the way across my canvas and get it on really super thick. If I did that, then when I painted my flower box part, you would be able to see that table line through my box, and I don't want that. So that's why at this stage, it's super thin. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here, and I'm gonna very precisely not put my table top in there. Here's the thing to remember that is helpful to me. We're not painting a photograph. We're painting a very kind of folksy, fun idea of this old porch with this cool old table and some pretty cheerful flowers sitting on it. Very farmhousey. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna take this super, again, no pressure on this brush. Don't push it down. Let the tip of that brush do all the work for you. Okay, So now I kind of have this idea of where my table is going to be. Now I'm gonna shake up my white because you can see I really hardly have any white left. I'm gonna squirt out some more white. You know, I think first, now again, now I have blue in my brush. I probably should have done this part first. I didn't. I could use a real brush. I could grab another foam brush, but it's okay for me. I never really, plan A has so seldom worked out in my life that I just roll with plan B. And plan B is going to be, I probably should have put my flower box in here first when I just had black and white in my brush. I didn't, no big deal. We're just gonna roll on with it. So from the edge of your canvas, I want you to measure almost to foam, just the black foam part. I want you to kind of measure in from each side. I'm so sorry, this is awkward to be leaning over. But I already forewarned you that this was super low budge. Okay. So I have a ruler here. Certainly, you know, for those of you that it's just like in your DNA that everything has to be super precise, you certainly could use a ruler and you could measure to make your lines. Hey, I didn't do too bad. I just prefer to kind of wing it when I'm painting. Sometimes I don't want to run and find a ruler. And honestly, I just don't like my paintings to be that precise. But again, art is about what you like, what makes your heart happy when you see it. So again, if that's for you, then, you know, by all means, you should do that. You know, be precise, use the ruler. Now my flower box came down not quite a foam length. So I'm gonna kind of put a guideline in here. Not quite a full foam. And this is not gonna be perfect. It's not gonna be precise. But really, I don't want it to be. And if you wonder what I'm kind of doing here in the background, I'm kind of using my foam brush to measure the sample that I already have painted. So roughly 2 foam brushes from your bottom line. I'm gonna kind of measure up. See, it's super easy. This is something anybody could do. Okay, so you can see I kind of have my box shape in there. So now, because I'm gonna have to totally lean over my canvas to kind of pencil it on with this brush, I'm gonna turn my camera off for just a minute. All right, so you can see I was able to kind of take my canvas and put it right in front of me like you're hopefully painting at home instead of, you know, from the side like I'm trying to do so you can see what I'm doing. So I got my box kind of penciled in, and you can see that my paint has that blue coming through. I actually kind of like it. I think that looks pretty. So, and most of it's going to be covered up anyways. But I wanted to show you, now that I have my shape on there, there's 2 different ways you could do it. You can use this foam brush. I can load it with some white, and I can come in here and I can kind of continue this dry brush technique that we have done on our canvas so far. I'm gonna get the sample that I'm looking at. So you can see that we want our box to be much more white than back here on the old siding of this house, or on this scratchy, chippy paint on this old table that we found. So we're definitely gonna make our box more solid, but that's gonna take several layers of paint. As you can see, as we first start the process of painting this box, You might look at your canvas and think, that does not look like her sample. And if you've painted with me, you know that I'm gonna say to you, hang with me. If you try to make this first layer of paint this thick, then you're gonna get the look like you would get when you're painting a wall. And you're not gonna kind of get this chippy, old, weathered farmhouse kind of look. So we're gonna do a couple of different layers of paint on here to make it fuller and heavier than the paint, scratchy, dry paint back here. So, but this is the first step. And then once we get to the flowers, that's like the funnest part. Now, the other way that you could start on your flower box is by taking this. Now, this is kind of a poor man's way to do knife painting if you wanted, or if you had. Let me see. Okay, well, sorry, I thought I had my knives here. Oh yeah, I do. Okay, here's a knife. Here's a knife. So if you have knives and you like that thick, kind of messy look, you could certainly use these to fill this in, or you could just use a card. The other thing that I have used is I have actually taken like a 3x5 index card and folded it so that it's smaller and a little more sturdy, more about this size. And then when you dip it into your paint, you kind of have to have quite a, not enough that it's gonna gloop and drip off, but you have to get a decent amount of paint on there. And then you literally just start kind of scratching and pulling that paint. Honestly, I think it's probably just as easy, maybe easier, to stick with your foam brush, but I just wanted to show you. And this is the kind of tips and tricks that you'll pick up when you watch different people paint. So it's just kind of a cool thing to try. So anyways, that kind of gives you an idea. I'm gonna go ahead and put the card down. I am going to do my box with this brush, but now that I have quite a bit of wet paint here on my canvas, I'm gonna let this box dry. And while I do, during this crazy time, I'm trying really, really hard to eat healthy. So I'm gonna turn off my camera. I'm gonna eat my salad with my awesome microgreens on it. And if you guys that know me probably know that sugar is my favorite food group, but during Lent, I've given up candy and goodies and baked goods. So it probably is a good thing, because being shut in my house, that's probably all I would be eating. But anyways, I'm gonna eat my salad. You guys grab something to eat while your box maybe dries. Grab another drink, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna finish this box. We're gonna let it dry, and then we're gonna start to paint our beautiful flowers. All right, I ate my lunch, I took my dog a walk, I opened all my windows, and so I'm ready to get back to our flower box. So I told you I was gonna go ahead and finish my box with my foam brush. Now notice on the edges, I'm just kind of gonna go the direction. For instance, you know, here I'm gonna paint up and down here on my edge. I'm gonna paint across up here. Remember, most of this very top of my box is gonna be covered with flowers. So I'm not worried that this is not perfectly straight. I mean, really none of it's perfectly straight. That's just not my jam. So let me see if I can get around this tripod. Now you can tell definitely that I'm using more paint on this box. It's not quite what we would do if we were painting a wall, but it's a whole lot different than this or this. I'm still doing it kind of slower in layers. And do you see these kind of chippy places where I didn't put quite as much paint? I kind of like what that looks like, so I'm gonna leave it. So now this is all very wet. I'm gonna let it dry. But while it's drying, I'm gonna go ahead and put another layer down here on my chippy table. So I still have some blue that's not totally dried up. And I'm just gonna grab some of that. Now my table, I don't want to paint this thick. Maybe my paint's going to end up looking a little thicker than this, but it's not going to be this full. Now I don't need very much of the blue, so I'm only squirting out just probably like one of the jumbo chocolate chips worth, just a little bit. I don't want to totally cover what I have going on underneath of there, but I do want to put a little bit more. And when I'm doing this kind of dry, scratchy technique, I'm using my whole brush, if this makes sense. Like, I'm not painting just with the blade, but I am gonna paint just with the blade when I kind of go here at the edge of my box, okay? And like here at the bottom. So you can see that that paint is a little thicker. And at the very end, I'll show you the samples that I have that I've painted. And then if we put all of our pictures on my Facebook page, you'll see that everybody kind of uses their brush a little bit, you know, differently. They maybe have a little more paint on their brush, but everybody's picture is gonna look very different and unique, but that's what's gonna make it beautiful. So now this is wet, and you can see I don't have a ton of paint down here, but what is down there is wet. This box is still wet. I can kind of hold it towards the light coming in my window, and I can see that it's still shiny. Up here is dry. So I'm actually gonna lay this brush down. I am gonna grab a clean foam brush that has not been used. I'm gonna grab some white just on my blade edge. And here at the side, I'm just gonna add. Of course, this is all gonna be flowers in here. I'm just gonna add another layer. Just kind of here in the areas that are gonna show. I'm gonna be sure when I go down this edge, I'm not gonna just paint right here in this area because it would look too obvious. So I am gonna let it kind of lap into this space in here that's gonna have flowers. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm gonna kind of go around my box. See how I'm gonna take it over into this area that's gonna be covered really with flowers and greenery. Just gonna whiten that up just a teeny bit more. What I don't want to do is just make it so solid and so much the same all the way down that it almost looks like bangs. If you imagine that this was somebody's forehead and they just had these like straight across bangs, like if you grew up when I grew up, that's how our moms cut our hair. That's not what we want. So I'm just gonna kind of thicken up here the areas that's going to show. I'm not making it as thick as wall paint would be, and I'm trying not to make it as thick as this. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna let that dry for just, I think maybe my edges. I tried intentionally not to get too much paint on those. Now I'm gonna grab, with that brush, just a teeny bit of black. I'm just barely gonna scuffle. I'm gonna scuffle my brush here along the edges, because remember again, this part is not even gonna show. It's gonna be covered with our flowers. So I'm mostly doing this. These heavier lines are made by using the blade, but then I kind of soften it out by using the full body of my brush. I am putting no pressure on this. If you put pressure on this brush when you're doing these kind of things, it will not turn out the way you want it to. So just gonna put a little bit, and then I'm gonna use the full body of my brush, kind of blend that just the teeniest bit. I wish there would be a way that I could show you how little bit of pressure I'm putting on my brush. Really none. If you were drawing with like charcoal pencil or pastels, you kind of have to be easy with those because they break easy. You have to be easy when you do this kind of dry brush painting. If you've ever done ceramics, which I love, you learn that technique of dry brushing. That's kind of what we're doing here. I'm gonna put a little bit here, kind of create a little bit of a shadow. I'm gonna make that a little bit darker, my tabletop. I'm gonna bring a little bit of my dark down into there. Just gonna dry brush some. Dry brush a little bit of dark here. Just create a little bit of a shadow. Here I'm using just the blade of my brush. And I'm just putting the teeniest bit of pressure down. Let's put a little shadow coming off here to the side. But now I'm going to take the full body of my brush and I'm just very lightly dry brushing. A little bit of dark there. It gives the table a little more texture. It also creates a little bit of shadowing. I mean, unless something is sitting out in the middle of the absolute blazing sun and there's not a shadow to be cast by anything, then things are not, things are gonna have some shadow. It just kind of helps our pieces of wood to look a little more weathered. So now that I've put some weathering and some shadow here, and I've done some here along the edges of my house siding, I'm gonna take my brush. This one just has black and white in it. I'm gonna load just a tiny bit of black, and then I'm gonna try to come in here before I put my flowers down, and I'm gonna try to weather my box a little bit. We still have work to do on this box that we will do with a real brush. So I don't want you to worry too much about that right now. We're really just putting some weathering. And see where I can see my brush strokes? I'm just gonna try to very gently kind of blend those in. That's not working so perfect. So now I'm going to use the blade of my brush, and I'm going to kind of do some line work this way to kind of, that way I don't just see two lines, but I kind of see some wood grain in my box. Now, what would you do if you go to do this part and you just go on to your box with just way too much black paint? You could take a paper towel, a clean paper towel, and you could dip it into some clean water, and you could never scrape or scrub, because you'll scrub back down to the canvas and create like a pothole in your paint. But you can immediately get a little bit of dampness and just kind of lightly dab the area that you maybe get too much paint in. Then you can let your whole box dry. Go grab your blow dryer, get it really dry, and then you would just take this brush, you would load it with white, and you would just soften that area. So let me show you what I mean. What if I did, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's way too much. I would grab my paper towel. Now I don't want this drippy, but you want it to be damp. I would just kind of when I teach, I like to show people what might happen and how they could correct it, because trust me, when I paint, things like this do happen. They happen to me, so I assume that maybe they'll happen to you. Now notice I am wiping, but I am not putting any pressure as I wipe, because I don't want to take any paint off. And the layers are fragile. I mean, they'll come off if you scrub. I don't want to take those layers off. So now, if I didn't like what that looked like, I kind of like the way that looks. I'm not going to put anything over that. But if I didn't like the way that looked, I would simply let that dry completely. I would probably grab my blow dryer, and then I would just use the same brush loaded with white and just do that light dry brush over top of that. So anyways, I'm going to hit pause here for a minute. I'm going to let you get caught up. You know, put some of this grain into the side using just the blade, but then use the whole body of your brush to kind of do some of this dry brush here. I'm going to lay this brush aside. I'm going to let this dry, and then we'll continue on.